What if the wealthiest man in Philadelphia stopped in the middle of Walnut Street one afternoon? Not because of a business deal, but because a little girl, with shoes torn open at the toes, looked up at him and whispered, "Sir, can I have a pair of shoes so kids at school won't laugh at me?" If stories of redemption, truth, and unexpected family touch your heart, please like and subscribe so you can stay with us until the very last chapter of this journey. Caleb Whitman adjusted the cuff of his suit as he stepped out of the Whitman Capitol Tower, its glass facade reflecting the thinning September light of Center City, Philadelphia. The air carried the faint scent of roasted chestnuts from a street vendor, mingled with the usual exhaust that rose from Walnut Street traffic. It had been another day of negotiations, board memos, and investor calls. His schedule was as polished and airtight as the Oxford shoes he wore. Yet none of that explained why he suddenly froze at the corner of Walnut and 17th. There, perched on the low granite ledge by the crosswalk, sat a girl no older than 6. Her braids were uneven, tied with fading pink ribbons, her school polo too big for her thin frame. But it was her shoes that stopped him cold. Canvas sneakers split wide at the toes, soles nearly gone. Beneath the fraying fabric, he saw the pale skin of her socks, rubbed raw where the pavement had bitten through. The girl looked at him as if summoning courage from someplace deep. "Excuse me, sir," she said. Her voice trembled but did not break. "Could I please have a pair of shoes? Just so the kids at school don't laugh at me anymore." Caleb blinked. In 41 years of life, no one had ever asked him for something so small, so painfully reasonable. He crouched down, suddenly less a CEO and more a man trying to meet the eyes of a child. "What's your name?" "Maya," she answered. Behind her, the late afternoon crowd pulsed with impatience. Law clerks rushing to SEPTA stations, couples heading toward Rittenhouse Square cafes. A few slowed, sensing a scene. Phones tilted upward like vultures ready to feed. Caleb's jaw hardened. "Stand up, Maya," he said softly. He extended his hand, not as a rescuer, but as if inviting her into a private circle where only truth mattered. She slipped her tiny fingers into his. Together they crossed Walnut Street and entered the Foot Locker tucked between a smoothie shop and a boutique. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, rows of sneakers stacked like soldiers. A teenage employee greeted them with bored indifference, until she noticed Caleb Whitman, whose face had appeared more than once in the Philadelphia Inquirer's business section. Maya's eyes widened as she scanned the shelves. She touched a pair of bright blue New Balance trainers, then quickly pulled her hand back, as though she had reached too far into a dream. "Go on," Caleb urged. "Pick the ones you'd want to run in." She hesitated, then lifted the shoes. "These," she whispered. The cashier rang them up. Before Caleb could pull out his black Amex, the store manager appeared, sharp suit, smile gleaming. "Mr. Whitman? Incredible to see you here. If you don't mind, we'd love to post this moment for our social channels. CEO helps needy child. Great PR for the community." He gestured for one of the staff to snap a photo. Caleb's expression chilled. His voice, though low, sliced through the room. "No. Put the phone away." The employee froze. The manager blinked. "No one," Caleb said, eyes locked on the girl beside him, "turns this child into a marketing campaign." The silence was so heavy you could hear the buzz of the ceiling light. Then Caleb slid his card across the counter. Maya clutched the box to her chest as if it were treasure. At the door, she stopped and looked up at him with eyes older than 6 years had any right to be. "I'll pay you back when I grow up," she said solemnly. Caleb felt something twist inside his chest. Not pity, something far sharper, something that cracked the shell he had built since the day his sister Eleanor died and left him with an empire but no anchor. He cleared his throat. "You don't owe me anything, Maya. Just Run as far as those shoes will take you. On the sidewalk again, the crowd had dispersed. The city hummed on, unaware that a tectonic shift had just occurred. Not in Whitman Capital's portfolio, but in the private ledger of one man's soul. For the rest of the walk down Walnut, Caleb could not shake the sound of her promise. "I'll pay you back when I grow up." It was the kind of vow that would not let him go. The wind that moved through Rittenhouse Square carried the crispness of early autumn. Red and gold leaves spiraled from the sycamores, gathering against the wrought iron fences that bordered the park. Office workers clustered at benches with takeout containers, students read with earbuds in, and the city's hum softened here into something almost gentle. Caleb Whitman leaned against the stone balustrade, watching the girl he had met only yesterday. Maya Brooks was running laps on the paved paths, her new blue sneakers flashing like sparks against the fallen leaves. She was laughing, truly laughing, as if each step released something she had held too tightly for too long. Her mother, Rachel, had thanked Caleb with quiet words and averted eyes, then hurried off to her evening shift at the South Philly dry cleaner. She had left Maya in the park, as she did most afternoons, until she could finish the late shift. Caleb checked his watch. 4:15 p.m. The hour when school children became latchkey kids, a term that carried weight in education policy and social work circles. No after-school program, no reliable adult supervision, just children waiting, filling time in public spaces, hoping to stay safe. Maya stopped running and sat on the bench beside him, her breath visible in the cooling air. She clutched her backpack, the straps frayed. Inside, he noticed the edge of a workbook labeled Andrew Jackson Elementary, Title I program. That detail caught his mind the way a surgeon's scalpel caught light, precise and telling. A Title I designation meant the school served a high percentage of children from low-income families, qualifying for federal aid. "You like your shoes?" Caleb asked. Maya nodded. "They don't laugh anymore." She traced the rubber edge with one finger, then looked up at him with sudden candor. "Mom works late. She says if I wait here, the park police keep watch. But sometimes it gets dark before she's done." Her words were simple, but the implications were not. As a mandated reporter, the term came to Caleb unbidden from the compliance trainings he required for Whitman Capital's healthcare facilities. Any adult who suspected a child's safety was compromised had a legal obligation to act. His chest tightened. Was he now responsible for more than new shoes? A sudden click interrupted his thoughts. Caleb turned. A man with a long lens camera crouched near the fountain, his focus trained squarely on Maya. "Beautiful story," the man called lightly. "Billionaire saves poor kid. Front page by tomorrow." Maya shrank into the bench. Caleb's body moved before his mind caught up. He strode across the path, hand raised. "Delete the photo. Now." The photographer smirked. "Public park, public rights." He tilted the camera, already scrolling to transmit the shot. Caleb's voice hardened. "That child is not your headline. You don't have her consent. You don't have mine." The man faltered, sensing the shift from casual confrontation to something colder, more dangerous. Others in the park noticed too. An office worker froze with a sandwich halfway to his mouth. A couple paused mid-conversation. The tension gathered like storm clouds. Caleb stepped closer. "Delete it or I call the police and file under exploitation of a minor. You'll be answering to a judge before you see another paycheck." There was a beat of silence. Then, with visible reluctance, the man thumbed at the screen until the photo vanished. He muttered a curse and backed away, disappearing into the trees. Caleb exhaled, steadying himself. He returned to the bench where Maya sat, eyes wide. "Why did he want my picture?" she asked quietly. "Because some people would rather sell a story than understand it," Caleb replied. "But I won't let them turn you into something for clicks." Her lips trembled, then pressed into a determined line. "I'm not a story. I'm just me." He nodded. "Exactly." They sat in silence for a while, the kind that doesn't press but protects. Overhead, the branches swayed, letting shafts of light break across the park in fleeting patterns. As the sun dipped lower, Rachel appeared, her uniform shirt smelling faintly of starch and cleaning chemicals. She looked tired, shadows beneath her eyes, but her smile was for Maya alone. "Mom!" Maya leapt into her arms, shoes flashing once more. "I ran faster than the wind!" Rachel laughed softly, then glanced at Caleb. "Thank you. Again. She talks about those shoes like they're made of gold." Caleb shook his head. "They're just shoes. What matters is what she does in them." For a moment, Rachel studied him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Gratitude mixed with caution, perhaps even suspicion. Then she took Maya's hand. "We live over on Passyunk," she said. "Small place, but it's home. If you ever... Well, thank you." They walked away together, their figures framed by the glow of the setting sun. Caleb remained in the park, the wind brushing against him, carrying with it the faint sound of Maya's laughter. He should have felt finished with the matter. He had provided what was needed, defended privacy when it mattered. His day could have ended neatly, with boundaries intact. But as the lamps flickered on across Rittenhouse Square, Caleb realized something had shifted again. Yesterday, it had been the shoes. Today, it was the look of relief on Rachel's face and the fragile dignity in Maya's words. "I'm not a story. I'm just me." The wind moved through the park once more, colder now, as if asking him whether he was ready for what came next. The air inside the dry cleaning shop on Washington Avenue felt heavy, almost greasy, as if invisible fingers clung to Caleb's throat the moment he stepped through the glass door. The bell above chimed weakly. Behind the counter, racks of pressed shirts swayed on metal rails, their plastic covers whispering with every movement. But it was not the sound that unsettled him. It was the smell. It wasn't detergent or starch. It was sharper, more chemical, a note that burned faintly in the nose and lingered at the back of the throat. Caleb had spent years funding hospital infrastructure projects. He had walked enough industrial sites to recognize danger when it drifted in the air. Perchloroethylene. PERC. The industry standard for dry cleaning, and one of the most notorious solvents on OSHA's hazardous substance list. Rachel Brooks stood at a pressing station, steam hissing around her. She wore a faded uniform polo, sleeves rolled up to reveal arms dusted with lint. Her cough came suddenly, startling in its rawness. She pressed a hand to her chest, tried to steady herself, then forced a smile when she saw Caleb. "Mr. Whitman? I wasn't expecting you here." Her voice was hoarse. "I was in the neighborhood," he said simply, though that was only half true. He had left Whitman Capital's downtown office earlier than usual, driven by a restlessness he couldn't name until it brought him here. Rachel waved a hand as if to dismiss the sound of her coughing. "It's just the steam. Happens to everyone." But Caleb's eyes narrowed. He knew better. He had read enough occupational health reports to recognize the signs: persistent cough, dizziness, fatigue. PRC inhalation could scar lungs, lower FEV1, trigger what physicians termed occupational asthma, or even long-term chemical-induced COPD. "Maya mentioned you work long shifts," he said carefully. Rachel shrugged. "Double shifts. Rent doesn't pay itself. Maya's shoes won't either." She tried to laugh, but it broke into another cough. Caleb stepped closer to the pressing table. "Do you have proper ventilation here? An industrial hygiene assessment? Negative air systems?" Her brow furrowed. "I have a fan." She gestured to a rattling box fan propped in the corner, blades coated in lint. Before Caleb could reply, Rachel swayed on her feet. The hot iron clattered against the stand. She gasped once, eyes rolling back, and collapsed. "Rachel!" Caleb caught her just before her head struck the floor. Her skin felt clammy, breath shallow. Without hesitation, he shouted to the boy working the register, "Call 911, now!" Minutes blurred into sirens and flashing lights. Paramedics rushed in, their movements brisk and professional. "Female, approximately 30, loss of consciousness," Caleb reported, forcing his voice to remain calm. Strong odor of per-se exposure in the air. The lead EMT nodded grimly. "We'll need to move her fast." They lifted Rachel onto a stretcher, strapped her in, and carried her toward the waiting ambulance. Caleb followed, his heart pounding harder than any boardroom confrontation ever had. He climbed in beside her, ignoring the paramedics' glance of surprise. As they sped toward Penn Presbyterian Medical Center, one medic fitted Rachel with an oxygen mask, while another checked vitals. "BP low, O2 saturation at 88. Could be acute inhalation event." Caleb held onto the edge of the stretcher, forcing himself to think clinically, almost like the hospital administrators he had once advised. He asked the right questions. When did symptoms start? How long had she been exposed? Did she have a spirometry baseline? But beneath the technical language, panic coiled tight. Because this wasn't just a case study. This was Rachel. This was Maya's mother. By the time they arrived at the ER, Rachel's eyelids fluttered weakly. Caleb stayed by her side as the triage nurse wheeled her in. The air inside the hospital smelled sterile, mercifully free of solvents. Doctors moved quickly, ordering labs, chest x-rays, and arterial blood gases. "History of occupational exposure?" one resident asked, glancing at Caleb. "Yes," Caleb answered before Rachel could speak. "Dry cleaning facility. Chronic exposure to PR. Today she had acute collapse." The doctor scribbled furiously. "We'll need spirometry and chest CT to assess. Possible chemical pneumonitis. Prep for pulmonary consult." Caleb stepped back, letting the professionals work. His eyes, though, never left Rachel. She was awake now, struggling to sit up. Her first words, muffled under the oxygen mask, were not about her health. "Maya, where's Maya?" "She's safe," Caleb said firmly. "I'll make sure of it." For a moment, Rachel seemed to relax. Then the monitors beeped, drawing the medical team's focus back to her. Caleb stood there, hands clenched at his sides. As the truth settled in, the girl who had asked for shoes was tethered to a life where her mother's very lungs were under siege from the chemicals she worked among. It was not charity Maya needed. It was protection. And suddenly, Caleb understood that his path into their lives would not be measured in credit card receipts, but in something far weightier: decisions about health, law, and survival. The emergency department at Penn Presbyterian was a choreography of urgency. Stretchers sliding through automatic doors, monitors beeping in counterpoint, nurses calling out vitals as if conducting a score of human survival. Caleb walked with the gurney until the staff directed him to step aside. He obeyed but remained close, his gaze fixed on Rachel Brooks as she disappeared behind a curtain marked Exam 3. Through the thin fabric, he heard fragments of medical dialogue. Arterial blood gas, chest CT, pulmonary consult stat. The clinical shorthand felt chillingly familiar. He had read reports like this while overseeing Whitman Capital's hospital portfolio, but those had been numbers, not a woman struggling for breath while her 6-year-old daughter waited at home. A resident emerged with a clipboard. "Are you family?" Caleb hesitated, then answered, "A friend. I was there when she collapsed." The resident nodded. "She's stable for now, but labs confirm signs of chronic chemical exposure. Her FEV1 is significantly reduced, and CT shows inflammatory changes consistent with occupational lung injury. We're treating it like chronic chemical pneumonitis. Think COPD-like decline, only accelerated. Caleb absorbed the words with a grim nod. He knew what FEV1 meant. Forced expiratory volume in 1 second. A metric that measured the strength of lungs. Rachel's had fallen too low for someone her age. She'll need immediate removal from exposure, the resident continued. Occupational medicine will file a consult, and we'll recommend spirometry follow-ups, pulmonary rehab, and likely FMLA leave. Returning to the dry cleaner is not safe. Caleb glanced toward the curtained bed. If she doesn't work, she doesn't have income. And she's a single parent. The resident's expression softened but did not waver. Her health won't survive without change. It's a matter of ADA accommodation, different work, safer environment. We'll document everything. When Caleb finally stepped behind the curtain, Rachel was propped against a pillow, oxygen tubing in her nose. Her face was pale but alert. Maya's drawing, a stick figure in blue shoes, lay folded on the bedside table, a talisman from her backpack. "You should be resting," Caleb said quietly. Rachel's lips twitched. "Doctors always say that, don't they? Even when rent's due." "Rachel." His tone was firm, but not unkind. "They're clear. You can't go back there. It's not just a cough. It's lung damage." Her eyes glistened, but she looked away. "If I stop working, we lose everything. The lease, groceries, school supplies. I don't have savings. No one to help. Maya," her voice cracked. "She deserves better than watching me fall apart." Caleb pulled the chair closer. He spoke not like a billionaire with resources to burn, but like a man who understood systems. There are mechanisms. FMLA protects your right to medical leave. ADA requires employers to provide reasonable accommodations. Workers' compensation can cover income if the injury is tied to your job. But even if all that takes time, I can offer something now. She frowned. Charity? No, Caleb said firmly. Employment. A role at Whitman Capital in records and compliance. Light duties, safe environment, health insurance included. It's not glamorous, but it's steady. And you'd be legally hired, not indebted. Rachel stared at him as if weighing whether his words were genuine or just another powerful man's convenient promise. Why would you do that? He paused, the truth raw in his throat. Because yesterday, your daughter taught me what courage looks like. And today, I won't stand by while her mother drowns in chemicals. Silence stretched between them, filled by the soft hiss of oxygen. Finally, Rachel whispered, I don't want to owe anyone. You won't, Caleb said. You'll earn it. Her hand trembled as she reached for Maya's drawing. She pressed it flat against her chest, as though anchoring herself with her daughter's simple lines. If I do this, she said at last, it's only because of her, not me. Caleb nodded. Then do it for her. A nurse entered with discharge paperwork, listing recommendations, pulmonary consult follow-up, spirometry in 2 weeks, occupational medicine evaluation, referral to social work for workers' comp. Caleb read every line, his business-honed eyes catching details others might overlook. Codes, acronyms, the not-so-subtle note. Patient should not return to current job environment. Rachel signed with a shaky hand. By evening, Caleb had arranged transport back to her apartment in Passyunk. The ride was quiet, Philadelphia's skyline glowing beyond the river. Maya met them at the door, rushing into her mother's arms with relief so fierce it made Rachel cry. Caleb stepped back into the hallway, giving them privacy. Yet he could hear Rachel's muffled words through the door. It's okay, baby. Mommy's going to be okay. We'll figure it out. For Caleb, the decision had already been made. Tomorrow he would draft an internal placement order at Whitman Capital. Not charity, not publicity, just structure, just survival. And as he walked down the narrow stairwell into the cool night, he realized something he had not felt in years. A decision that mattered more than quarterly returns. The playground at Andrew Jackson Elementary smelled faintly of mulch and cafeteria pizza drifting from the open windows. Children swarmed the asphalt lot like bright-colored birds, their laughter carrying over the hum of traffic from East Passyunk Avenue. Amid the chatter, Maya Brooks sat at the edge of the basketball court, tracing patterns in the dust with the toe of her new blue sneakers. It had been 2 weeks since Rachel's collapse at the dry cleaner and her reassignment to Whitman Capital's Records and Compliance Unit. Caleb had followed through on every promise. Employment contract signed, benefits activated, a cubicle by the window where Rachel could breathe freely without fumes. But for Maya, the adjustment was slower. Her classmates still noticed what was missing: her father. "Hey, poor kid," a boy's voice jeered. Maya stiffened. Tommy Green, the tallest boy in 3rd grade, swaggered toward her with 2 friends at his back. His hair stuck up in messy tufts, his grin wide with mischief. "You think those shoes make you somebody?" he sneered. "Everyone knows you don't got a dad. Bet your mom had to beg for those." A ripple of laughter rose from the other boys. Heat surged into Maya's cheeks. Her fists clenched around the straps of her backpack. "Take it back," she said, her voice tight. "Or what?" Tommy shoved her shoulder. "You'll cry for your rich friend to save you?" Something inside Maya snapped. She swung her small fist with all the force her body could gather. It landed squarely against Tommy's jaw. He stumbled back, shocked more than hurt, clutching his face. The playground erupted. Shouts, gasps. A whistle from the recess aide. Within minutes, Maya was marched into the principal's office. Her knuckles stung, but her jaw was set. Tommy sat across from her, milking his injury with exaggerated groans. The principal, Mrs. Rodriguez, folded her hands. "Maya, this is serious. Violence isn't tolerated here. This could be an office referral, maybe even suspension." Maya's lip trembled, but she lifted her chin. "He called me poor. Said I don't have a dad. I just wanted him to stop." Mrs. Rodriguez sighed. "Words can hurt, but hitting makes it worse. We have processes for this. Restorative justice circles, conflict resolution. But parents need to be present." Rachel couldn't leave work. Her new job was still probationary. So the call went to Caleb Whitman. When he entered the school office, his tailored suit looked out of place against the faded posters of multiplication tables. Maya's face lit with both relief and shame. "She's not in trouble, is she?" Caleb asked the principal, his voice calm but firm. Mrs. Rodriguez explained the situation, outlining the school's disciplinary options. "We could suspend her, but research shows restorative approaches often work better. Still, the decision must involve the guardian or parent." Caleb nodded slowly. "Then let's try the restorative circle." An hour later in the library, chairs were arranged in a circle. Maya sat with her small frame hunched, Tommy opposite her, still rubbing his jaw. The circle also included Mrs. Rodriguez, the recess aide, and Caleb. "Here," Mrs. Rodriguez began. "We speak one at a time, honestly and respectfully. Maya, would you like to share what you felt?" Maya's eyes filled. "I was embarrassed. Everyone laughed at me before because my shoes were broken. Now Tommy said I don't have a dad. I didn't want to feel small again." Her words hung in the air, raw and unpolished. Tommy shifted in his chair, guilt creeping across his face. I just thought it was funny. Didn't know it hurt that much." "You knew," Maya shot back, but her voice cracked. Caleb leaned forward, his tone measured. "Maya doesn't need pity. She doesn't need to be made an example of. She needs the same thing every child here deserves: respect. Title I funding helps with resources, but dignity comes from how you treat each other. Mrs. Rodriguez nodded. So what do we need to make this right? Tommy mumbled, "Sorry." "That's a start," Caleb said gently. He turned to Maya. "And what do you want, truly?" Maya's shoulders squared. "I don't need anyone to feel sorry for me. I just need shoes so I can learn. I just want to be like everyone else." The room went quiet. Even Mrs. Rodriguez blinked back sudden emotion. Tommy whispered again, "I'm sorry, Maya." This time it sounded real. The circle closed with agreement. No suspension, but both children would help in the library for a week, shelving books side by side. Mrs. Rodriguez called it accountability, not punishment. Afterward, Caleb walked Maya out to the steps. She clutched his hand tightly, as though afraid the world might crumble if she let go. "I'm not bad, am I?" she asked in a small voice. "No," Caleb said firmly. "You're brave. Bravery sometimes comes out the wrong way. But today, you spoke truth. That matters more than any punch." Maya exhaled, shoulders lighter. As they stepped into the afternoon air, the city sounds rushed back: bus brakes, car horns, the chatter of students spilling onto the street. Caleb realized that this small conflict, raw and ordinary, had revealed something vital. Maya didn't crave wealth or fame or special treatment. She only wanted to walk into her classroom without shame. And for that, he thought, he would fight every boardroom battle, every headline, every shadow from his past. The apartment on Passyunk Avenue smelled faintly of tomato sauce simmering from a neighbor's kitchen. Pipes clanged in the walls, a reminder that the building had stood for decades, patched and repatched with the kind of fixes that landlords called good enough. Rachel Brooks had cleared space on the dining table, pushing aside folded laundry to make room for the paper bags Caleb carried in. "Chicken soup and bread," he said, setting them down. "Nothing fancy." Rachel smiled, tired but genuine. Her breathing was easier these days, though the occasional wheeze still caught her mid-sentence. The pulmonologist had told her the damage was real, but manageable if she avoided further exposure. "You've already done too much," she murmured. "Soup isn't too much," Caleb replied. "Besides, I was promised a tour of the famous shoebox." At that, Maya darted from her bedroom, her braids bouncing. She held a battered cardboard shoebox, its lid covered in stickers half peeled by time. "This is our memory box," she declared, placing it on the table like a treasure chest. "Mom says we put everything important inside so we don't forget." Caleb leaned closer, curiosity tugging at him. "May I look?" Maya nodded solemnly. She pulled out drawings, ticket stubs, and tiny trinkets. A crayon sketch of a house with smoke curling from the chimney, a broken keychain shaped like Liberty Bell, a library card, edges worn soft. Then, at the very bottom, a faded photograph curled at the corners. She handed it to Caleb before Rachel could stop her. His hand froze. The image showed two young women on the steps of the University of Pennsylvania campus. One was unmistakably Rachel, her smile brighter, her hair shorter. The other woman... Caleb's chest tightened painfully. Eleanor Whitman, his sister. The air seemed to thin. He had not spoken her name aloud in years, had not allowed himself to remember her without bitterness. Eleanor, who had been his compass before the accident took her life. Eleanor, who had spent weekends volunteering at shelters, insisting that wealth only mattered if it lifted others. "You knew her?" Rachel's voice was cautious, almost apologetic. Caleb lowered himself into a chair, still staring at the photo. "She was my sister. My only sister." Rachel's eyes softened. Then you know. She wasn't just kind. She was relentless. She found me when I was barely 16, drifting through the foster system. She said I deserved mentors, not just case numbers. She helped me apply to Penn's community outreach program. Without her, I don't know where I would have ended up. Caleb swallowed hard, the words caught in his throat. I didn't know she worked with you. She didn't talk about herself much, Rachel said. She asked about my classes, my shifts, whether I had enough food. She always carried granola bars in her bag like she expected to find someone hungry. When the accident happened, I couldn't bring myself to attend the memorial. It felt like the world had stolen the one person who believed in me. Caleb's hands trembled slightly as he set the photo on the table. For years, he had buried himself in Whitman capital, turning grief into expansion, charity into glossy PR campaigns. He had abandoned Eleanor's unfinished work because it was easier to build skyscrapers than to sit with loss. Maya's voice broke the silence. So, we were family friends all along? Rachel reached for her daughter's hand. In a way, yes. Your Aunt Eleanor wanted me to remember I wasn't alone. I guess she was right. Her brother showed up when we needed him most. Caleb felt the weight of that truth settle on him. It wasn't coincidence that he had paused on Walnut Street that day. It was Eleanor's shadow, her legacy pulling him back toward the path he had deserted. He leaned back, forcing himself to meet Rachel's gaze. I've failed her, he admitted. When she died, I turned away from everything she stood for. I called it efficiency, focus, but it was running. Rachel shook her head gently. Maybe you were just waiting for the right reminder. The words struck deeper than she knew. Caleb stared again at the photograph. Eleanor's arm draped over Rachel's shoulder, both women laughing at something just outside the frame. It was a glimpse of a world where kindness wasn't strategy, but instinct. I want to honor her, he said finally, his voice low. Not just with buildings or plaques, with choices, with people. Rachel's eyes shimmered, though she looked down quickly. Then start here. Not because we're your project, but because we're real. Because Maya deserves a future. From the corner of the room, Maya piped up with the bluntness only a child possessed. And because Mom needs someone to remind her to eat soup when she's tired. Laughter rippled through the heaviness, breaking it like light through storm clouds. Caleb smiled, shaking his head. She's already bossing me around. That's her gift, Rachel said. She sees what's missing and says it out loud. They ate together at the table, Rachel slowly savoring the soup, Maya dunking bread into her bowl, Caleb listening more than speaking. The flickering kitchen light cast uneven shadows, but the warmth in the room was steady. Later, when Rachel tucked Maya into bed, Caleb lingered by the shoebox. He touched the photograph once more, tracing the outline of Eleanor's face. For the first time, remembering her didn't feel like drowning. It felt like breathing again. As Rachel returned, he looked at her with quiet resolve. I can't undo the years I spent ignoring her vision, but maybe I can start again. With you. With Maya. With the people she believed in. Rachel studied him, wary but hopeful. We'll hold you to that, Caleb Whitman. He nodded. Please do. That night, as he stepped out into the cold air of Passyunk Avenue, the city lights blurred through the sting in his eyes. He realized he wasn't just leaving an apartment. He was carrying a promise forward, a shoebox full of memories, a photograph of a sister, and the fragile beginning of a family that might finally breathe together. Whitman Capital's headquarters stood on Philadelphia's Avenue of the Arts, its glass atrium catching the morning light like a cathedral of commerce. Inside, however, the atmosphere was anything but serene. The quarterly board meeting had begun, and the air was already charged, tense, expectant, as if a storm front were gathering. Caleb sat at the head of the long walnut table, shoulders squared, his expression calm but watchful. He knew today would not be routine. On the agenda was a resolution that would test everything: his leadership, his ethics, his family's legacy. First item, intoned the corporate secretary, CFO Lane's proposal regarding the reallocation of funds from our CSR and workplace safety initiatives into the projected Keystone Industrial Acquisition. Victoria Lane leaned forward, her tailored gray suit sharp as her words. Colleagues, this acquisition represents a 30% margin increase within the first fiscal year. But to secure it, we must cut underperforming programs. That includes redundant community grants and occupational health funds. She paused for effect. With respect, we are not a charity. We are fiduciaries. Our duty is to maximize shareholder return. Several board members nodded. Others exchanged uneasy glances. Caleb felt his pulse tighten, but his voice came steady. With respect, Victoria, CSR isn't redundant. It's risk management. OSHA violations, worker injuries, and class action lawsuits can sink a balance sheet faster than any bad merger. Our grants protect both lives and capital. Victoria's smile was thin. Spoken like your sister, Eleanor. But she's gone, Caleb. This is about profits, not nostalgia. The words struck like a blow. Caleb inhaled slowly, grounding himself. He remembered Eleanor's laughter in the shelters, her stubborn insistence that wealth was only as noble as the good it accomplished. He would not let her be dismissed. I move, Caleb said, that instead of cuts, we establish the Workplace Health Fund, dedicated to supporting remediation for employees harmed by toxic exposure, dry cleaning, manufacturing, chemical plants. It's an ESG imperative, and it positions us ahead of the SEC's 10K risk disclosures. The room murmured. ESG, environmental, social, and governance, had become a hot-button term. Some saw it as forward-looking strategy, others as costly distraction. Victoria's eyes gleamed. Or is this personal? Shall I show the board why our CEO is suddenly so passionate about laundry workers? She tapped her tablet. A series of images appeared on the projection screen. Caleb leaving Rachel Brooks's apartment, carrying a grocery bag. Caleb walking beside Maya to school. Caleb seated in a hospital waiting area. Each frame grainy, pulled from long-lens photography. Conflict of interest, Victoria said smoothly. Our CEO entangled with a family who stands to benefit directly from his proposed fund. How convenient. Gasps circled the table. One director muttered, SEC could tear us apart if that sticks. Caleb remained still. His jaw tightened, but his voice did not waver. Yes, I know them. I helped them. And that is precisely why I'm recusing myself from today's vote. I will not allow personal connections to taint corporate governance. He stood, pushing his chair back deliberately. I request an independent committee review the fund proposal. Let it rise or fall on merit, not innuendo. In the meantime, I step aside from the decision. The boardroom fell into stunned silence. In corporate culture, recusal was a nuclear option, an admission of risk, but also a statement of principle. Victoria pounced. So noted. In your absence, we will proceed. She expected weakness. Instead, Caleb's posture radiated resolve. He had given up control, but not conviction. As he left the room, murmurs rippled behind him, some doubtful, others impressed. He caught one director whisper, "At least he knows what fiduciary duty means." In the hallway, Caleb exhaled. The storm had broken, but its aftermath was far from settled. He had gambled his authority to protect both integrity and the people who had come into his life unexpectedly. For the first time in years, he wasn't sure if he would keep his chair as CEO. But he was certain of one thing. He had kept faith with Eleanor. And with Maya. The offices of the Community Legal Aid Society in downtown Philadelphia didn't have marble floors or mahogany tables like Whitman Capital. The lobby smelled faintly of old coffee and toner ink, its carpet worn thin by years of clients walking in with hope and fear in equal measure. Rachel Brooks sat in a plastic chair, clutching a manila folder. Inside were her discharge papers from Penn Presbyterian, pulmonary consult notes, and workplace records, her case against the South Philly dry cleaner, where she had nearly lost her breath and her livelihood. Maya sat beside her, swinging her legs nervously, a sketchbook open on her lap. Across from them, Caleb paced slowly, jacket draped over one arm. He was here not as CEO, but as an ally, though he made sure to keep his distance from the actual legal proceedings. He understood the importance of boundaries. Money could cloud perception, but evidence, that was what won. The attorney who finally entered the room was young, with sleeves rolled up and a messenger bag heavy with case files. Her nameplate read, Amira Khan, Escra, Labor and Employment Division. "Rachel," she said warmly, shaking hands, "I reviewed your intake forms. This is a textbook OSHA complaint. Prolonged exposure to perchloroethylene, no adequate ventilation, no industrial hygiene monitoring, no abatement plan. You also qualify for workers' compensation under Pennsylvania law." Rachel's voice was hesitant. "My employer said I'd be sued for defamation if I reported anything." Amira's smile was dry. "Threats don't erase statutes. OSHA requires a log of exposures, the OSHA 300. If they failed to maintain it, that's a violation. Workers' comp will cover medical bills and lost wages. And under the ADA, you're entitled to reasonable accommodation in another role, which you've already secured at Whitman Capital. You're on strong ground." Maya tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Does that mean Mommy won't get sick again?" Amira softened. "It means we'll push for safer workplaces so no one else has to." Caleb finally spoke. "I'll fund an independent industrial hygiene assessment. No money exchanged with Rachel, no direct involvement in the claim. But a third-party evaluation will document the chemical levels at that facility. It keeps the record clean and avoids any perception of financial conflict." Amira nodded. "That's exactly the right move. Courts look for impartial data." The following week, 2 specialists arrived at the South Philly shop, their portable spectrometers whirring softly as they tested the air. The numbers were damning. Perchloroethylene levels exceeding OSHA's permissible exposure limit by nearly 40%. Ventilation fans clogged with lint. No abatement plan on file. Rachel watched from across the street, Caleb standing silently at her side. "They'll hate me for this," she murmured. "They'll fear the truth," he corrected. "That's different." But fear had teeth. Days later, a letter arrived at Rachel's apartment. Thick paper, aggressive typeface. Notice of intent to sue for defamation and damages. The dry cleaner's owner accused her of fabricating illness to extort money. Rachel's hands shook as she read it. "They're going to ruin me." Caleb gently took the paper, scanning every line. "No, they won't. Because facts don't bend to intimidation." He slid it back across the table. "Your attorney will file a response citing whistleblower protections under OSHA Section 11C. Retaliation is illegal." At the next legal consult, Amira explained the strategy. "We'll file a formal OSHA complaint, submit the industrial hygiene report, and pursue workers' comp. The defamation threat is smoke. What matters is documentation. We'll request impairment ratings from your pulmonologist to quantify damages." Rachel sat straighter, still pale but steadier. So I don't need Caleb to pay them off? Absolutely not, Amira said firmly. If we let money solve this, the system never changes. We follow the law step by step. That's how we protect not only you, but every worker after you. Maya whispered, almost to herself. Like a circle. One person breathes better, and then everyone can. The words silenced the room for a moment. Even Caleb felt something catch in his chest. Eleanor would have said the same. Outside, as they left the office, the October sky was gray, wind carrying the scent of rain. Rachel stopped on the sidewalk, hugging the folder of documents to her chest. I thought I had to choose between being sick or being broke, she admitted. But maybe there's another way. There is, Caleb said. The legal line. It's slower than money, harsher than sympathy, but it lasts. Maya slipped her hand into both of theirs. For the first time, Rachel let herself believe that line could hold. The Franklin Institute's grand rotunda glittered under the dome of Benjamin Franklin's statue. Banners strung overhead reading Philadelphia Regional Science Fair. Tables stretched in neat rows, each draped with posters, models, and laptop displays. Parents, teachers, and judges in lanyards threaded through the aisles while children explained projects with a mix of nerves and pride. At one corner, Maya Brooks stood on tiptoe to pin her last chart in place. Her trifold board bore the title, Clean Air, Kind Lungs. The letters, cut from blue construction paper, curved above hand-drawn diagrams of alveoli, bar graphs of particulate exposure, and a model lung crafted from balloons and plastic tubing. Rachel, pale but steadier these days, adjusted her daughter's ponytail. You've worked so hard on this, she whispered. It's for you, Mom, Maya said. So no one has to breathe chemicals at work again. Caleb arrived just as the first judges approached. He had left the boardroom in a maelstrom of uncertainty, the workplace health fund proposal still pending an independent review. But today wasn't about shareholders. Today was about a child who believed science could heal. The judge, a pulmonologist from Penn, leaned over Maya's display. Tell me what you've built here. Maya's voice was small but clear. This model shows how lungs breathe in clean air. But if the air has bad chemicals, like perchloroethylene from dry cleaners, the alveoli get hurt. My mom worked in a place with too much perk. She got sick. So I tested air with a sensor near her job and made a chart. If we keep air clean, lungs stay kind, and people stay alive. The pulmonologist blinked, then scribbled notes. Another judge asked, "What's your solution?" Maya pointed to a line on her poster. We can use wet cleaning machines instead of perk. They're safer and don't hurt workers. It costs more at first, but cheaper than hospital bills. The room hushed. Her words carried the gravity of lived truth, far sharper than any polished corporate pitch. Caleb felt his throat tighten. This was what Eleanor had always believed. Evidence and empathy braided together could bend policy. At the far end of the hall, meanwhile, the Whitman Capital Board convened in an emergency session. News of the OSHA investigation into the South Philly dry cleaner had reached them. Documents revealed not only hazardous exposures, but also a hidden clause in the Keystone Industrial acquisition, the very deal Victoria Lane had championed. Buried in the fine print was evidence of undisclosed environmental liabilities. If purchased, the company would saddle Whitman Capital with millions in legal risk. The audit committee demanded answers. Victoria's calm facade cracked under scrutiny. It's immaterial, she insisted, but the compliance officer presented memos she had concealed. Her credibility dissolved. Back at the Franklin Institute, the announcer tapped the microphone. Third place in the elementary division, second place, and first place goes to Maya Brooks, Clean Air, Kind Lungs. The crowd erupted in applause. Maya's eyes widened as she stepped onto the stage, ribbon trembling in her hands. She looked out over the sea of faces, then found Caleb and Rachel in the crowd. "I want to say thank you," she began, voice shaking but strong. "Not for the prize, for the chance to speak. My mom worked in chemicals that made her sick. Lots of people still do. I got new shoes this year so kids wouldn't laugh at me. I promised I'd pay back the man who gave them to me. This is how I'll pay him back, by helping lungs breathe clean." The rotunda fell silent, then rose in a wave of applause that seemed to shake the marble columns. Caleb closed his eyes, the sound washing over him like absolution. Eleanor's voice seemed to echo, "This is why we build." Later that afternoon, his phone buzzed. A text from the chair of the audit committee. Workplace Health Fund approved. Victoria Lane suspended pending investigation. Full board vote, 8-2 in your favor. Caleb exhaled, shoulders sagging with relief. The fund would stand. Rachel's case would stand. Maya's vision, childish, brilliant, uncompromising, would have teeth in the real world. When he turned back, Maya was still clutching her ribbon. She ran into his arms with the unfiltered joy only a child could summon. "See?" she whispered. "Told you I'd pay you back." Caleb held her close. "You've given me more than I ever gave you, Maya." And for the first time in a long while, the future felt not like a ledger of debts, but a ledger of hope. The Schuylkill River Trail shimmered with late autumn light, water glinting between the bare branches that arched overhead. Cyclists and joggers passed in bursts of rhythm, their breath rising in white clouds. Caleb walked slowly beside Rachel and Maya, the city skyline lifting behind them in glass and steel. For the first time in months, he felt his own chest expand without weight. Rachel inhaled deeply, too. No oxygen tubing this time, her breath steadier after weeks of treatment and rest. "I didn't think I'd ever enjoy walking again," she admitted, smiling at Maya, who skipped ahead with her blue sneakers flashing. "Breathing used to feel like a job." "It should never feel that way," Caleb said. "Not for you, not for anyone." The words carried more than personal meaning. The Workplace Health Fund had been officially launched that week. Whitman Capital's press release outlined its mission: grants to remediate toxic exposure sites, funding for industrial hygiene assessments, and scholarships for workers retraining into safer industries. The SEC filing, once a battlefield, now carried ESG as a proud pillar of corporate identity. Rachel tilted her head toward him. "You risked your career for this." "I risked numbers," Caleb corrected softly. "You risked your lungs." They walked in silence until Maya shouted from ahead, "Come on! I want to show you the new place." The apartment was gone now. Rachel had signed a lease for a modest unit in University City, closer to the hospital and her new role at Whitman Capital. Caleb had quietly made sure the building was ADA compliant, with air filtration systems that passed every standard. When they arrived, Maya swung the door open like a tour guide. "See? The window's actually open. And the kitchen doesn't smell like bleach. And—" She darted into the living room, pointing proudly. "Look, we made a wall just for family." On it hung 3 frames. One held Maya's science fair ribbon, bright blue against white matting. Another displayed her drawing of lungs, 2 balloons taped to cardboard, captioned in uneven handwriting, "Clean air, kind lungs." And at the center, framed carefully, was the photograph of Eleanor Whitman, smiling arm in arm with a young Rachel outside Penn's campus. Caleb stopped in his tracks. The sight of his sister's face beside Maya's work pressed into him like both wound and balm. Rachel stepped close, her hand brushing his sleeve. "Maya wanted Eleanor here. She said your sister should see how we're paying forward what she started." Caleb swallowed hard. She'd be proud of both of you. Dinner that night was simple: roast chicken, green beans, bread warmed in the oven. They ate around a table that wobbled slightly at one leg, but laughter filled the gaps. Rachel recounted her first full week in records and compliance, where she'd mastered filing SEC exhibits and surprised her supervisor by catching a mislabeled OSHA citation. "I never thought compliance could feel empowering," she said with a grin. "But knowing the details means knowing where people can't cut corners on safety." "You're protecting workers from the inside," Caleb said. "That matters more than any board resolution." Maya interrupted with her shoebox, now freshly decorated with stickers. She pulled out a sheet of paper written in careful block letters. "It's my contract," she announced. Rachel raised her eyebrows. "Contract?" Maya cleared her throat and read, "I, Maya Brooks, promise to pay back the shoes by working hard every year. Payment is 1 goal achieved for school, 1 promise kept at home, and 1 dream chased for the future. Signed, Maya." She slid the page across the table toward Caleb, who felt his chest tighten again. He read the childish scrawl twice before answering. "This is the best contract I've ever signed," he said, pulling a pen from his jacket. With deliberate strokes, he signed beneath her name, Caleb Whitman. Maya clapped her hands. "Now it's official." After dinner, they lit a small fire in the living room's old brick hearth. The flames crackled, filling the space with warmth that no boardroom or penthouse could match. Caleb sat back, watching Rachel lean into the glow, Maya curled at her side. He thought of how it had begun, a pair of shoes on Walnut Street, a plea whispered by a girl too young to carry such shame. Now, months later, there was a home that truly breathed, walls safe from toxins, air clear of chemicals, a table set not with wealth, but with belonging. Caleb did not ask Rachel to marry him that night. There were no grand gestures, no champagne or velvet boxes. Instead, he asked something quieter, truer. "May I stay?" His voice barely rose above the crackle of the fire. Rachel looked at him, eyes reflecting the flames. She nodded. "Only if you understand. We're not a charity. We're a family. Chosen." Caleb reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "Chosen," he echoed. Maya stirred sleepily, opening one eye. "Good. Then nobody laughs at us anymore." "No, sweetheart," Caleb whispered, lifting her into his arms. "Nobody laughs. Not ever again." He carried her to her new bedroom, tucked her beneath covers patterned with stars, and placed the signed contract on the nightstand. The page trembled slightly in the draft from the heater, but it held firm, like a promise sealed not by wealth, but by love. When he returned to the living room, Rachel was staring at the family wall, at Eleanor's smiling face beside Maya's ribbon. The firelight painted her features soft, peaceful. Caleb stood beside her. For the first time in years, the silence inside him was gone. The house, the people, even the air itself seemed to breathe. And for the man who had once thought redemption impossible, that was enough. Thank you for staying with us until the very end of this journey. A story of shoes, lungs, and love that built a family and a future. If this touched your heart, please consider subscribing so we can keep sharing stories of hope and healing together.